Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. I figure this would be a good time to talk about my baseball sons. That's what I consider the Minnesota Twins prospects, essentially. I'm rooting for all of them. These are all my boys. But Seth Stowe asked us Twins Daily guys to submit a updated top 30 for him. He's going to compile those. That's the list that I want you to check out in particular, because that's going to combine a bunch of different lists from Twins Daily contributors, and it always ends up being a really good list to look at. I actually often will like that list more than my own list, if that sounds crazy, but let's go through my list here. This is a kind of a quick and dirty, fun way to talk about some of these prospects, get you familiarized with some of these names, and then I want you to go check out, the minor league reports, check out our combined list, what the combined top 20 comes out to be, this. I do put effort into these. I do try. It's not a very fun thing to do for me, to be honest. It can be difficult to try to put these together. But also, you always keep in mind that they're not right. Nobody's ever gotten a prospect list right. Even like the best of the best evaluators have never nailed a prospect list and got everything right. So keep that in mind as we go through these. If you see a guy you really like, who's performing really well, anybody not in this top 30, they all tied for 31st. So if you're wondering where somebody else is, tied for 31st. But seriously, it does get incredibly difficult to sort of cut things off, as there's some separation toward the top of the list, but man, toward the end, it gets really difficult. So this is the bottom 5, the 26 through 30 on my list. I'm just going to rip through these. A lot of this is kind of guys repeating in spots near to where they were. You'll see in the column E I have is their current ranking for me right now. And then in column G, that's what I had them coming into this season. So you can see there, Danny Andrade, he's like 12. No, he's 17. He was an international free agent signing for the Twins, a guy definitely to keep on your radar, but we're not going to be seeing him anytime soon. So that was 26 through 30. Let's look at 21 through 25. Emmanuel Rodriguez is another really young guy who they signed on the international market where we haven't seen him yet. I want to mention that the new entrants in this area are Edouard Julien, Spencer Steer, and Nick Gordon. Both Julien and Steer have an OPS excess of 900 right now. Julien for Fort Myers, Steer for Cedar Rapids. And remember, Cedar Rapids is above Fort Myers now, part of the changes to the minor league system this year. So those two guys, they were certainly in that 31st tie preseason for me. So them having such good starts this year and, having some prospect intrigue with both of those guys had made me feel like I'm going to push them up just outside of my top 20. Nick Gordon, of course, a guy I've had up in my list before. In terms of age, it's hard to push him too far in terms of prospect status, but the way he's performed this year and him adding some defensive flexibility, I think that is really a big deal. Him getting some outfield, specifically some center field experience, that makes him a much more valuable guy. Moving forward into the 16 through 20 range, kind of, I guess the most noteworthy move here is that Brent Rooker moves all the way down from 10th to 20th for me. This is a guy who's mashing in AAA, but he's 26. He's going to be 27 in November. So it's kind of hard to hold a lot of prospect value, a lot of, hope that Brent Rooker is going to be, he could be a DH, he could be a replacement for Nelson Cruz, but he's still very much a bat first guy, going to strike out quite a bit, going to have probably a low batting average, not going to be a very big defensive asset, not going to be an asset on the bases. So, his overall value he can provide is pretty limited at this point. And he's just, at 26, it's hard to really put a lot of value on his prospect status. A few other pitchers in the mix there. Cole Sands moves down a little bit. He's been walking a lot more guys than he did previously. That I'm a little concerned about that. I still like him quite a bit. Hopefully he turns that around. Chris Valamont moving up a little bit. He's been striking out a lot of batters. His overall numbers aren't outstanding, but he has a very unusually high BABIP so far this year. And then Misael Urbina, another one of those. He's 19, a really young guy that they signed for a big contract in the international market. I'm sliding him back a bit because he's playing more left field, a little bit more left field than center field, and that really would have a big impact on his value, in my opinion, if he is more of a corner outfielder than a center fielder. Moving up into the 11 through 15 range, Wander Javier, I kept him inside my top 20 entering this year. I know a lot of people faded him even more, but I'm bumping him up a little bit, even from that 18 up to 15th. He's hit, I think, 6 homers in his last 17 games coming into today. So a guy who's hot, kind of runs hot and cold, so we'll keep an eye on him. 14th, a lot of people probably surprised to see Aaron Sabato down this far, the team's first round pick recently. I had him 9th coming into the season, and he's a guy who's striking out in about a third of his plate appearances, a guy who has a slugging percentage under 300, taking a lot of walks, and it is hard to hit for power in that environment down in Fort Myers and in Florida, the other teams they play, but not a guy I was really too hyped about before, and he's also, not hitting for power. So I'm going to fade him a little bit. Hopefully he shows more, and I kind of find reasons to move him back up, but that's where I feel good about him now. Blaine Enlow is going to miss the rest of the year and part of probably next year with Tommy John surgery. I still don't feel like that's a big reason to knock his overall prospects. I don't think it's going to end up hurting his career overall, is what I'm saying when I leave guys who are hurt in their spots. That's how I feel about Enlow. Bailey Ober, moving him up, not just because he's pitched well, because we've seen him pitch well his entire minor league career, but because the velo is up. Seeing him throwing harder is a big deal in being able to believe, that he's going to be able to get major leaguers out versus, just watching him dominate in high A and double A. Now we're seeing him pitch at the high minors in the majors and throwing harder. So I felt like that was definitely reason to bump him up from 20th from 12th. Matt Cantorino, I also moved up quite a bit. He was very impressive for Cedar Rapids, moving him up from 17th to 11th. I still feel like he's kind of below a level that he should be. He's kind of beating up on guys in a level that I think he's above now. I think he's better than that. I would like to see him in double A. And I still think he might be a reliever. You could say that about any starting pitching prospect, so don't read too much into that. But if I have Cantorino a little lower than other people, that might be why. But I have bumped him up. I was really impressed with the way he was pitching before he got hurt with Cedar Rapids. Next group of players, 6 through 10, Josh Winder makes it all the way up from outside of my top 20 to inside my top 10. He's had an ERA around 2, he's had a whip around 1, and a strikeout to walk ratio of nearly 6 in double A. So you're doing that, in 2019, he was in Cedar Rapids, which that was low A in 2019 before we've had that switch. So, I kind of thought, sort of like in that Cantorino discussion, I thought he was kind of beating up on younger competition. I didn't really want to take too much stock in his numbers. He wasn't throwing as hard as he is now. And I saw during the offseason in 2020, him, there were reports and there was video of him lighting up the radar gun in training facilities. I didn't want to bump him up because I wanted to see him do it on the field, basically. Now that he has, I kind of kept him down before that. Now that he has shown it, I felt like it was definitely worthy of shooting him up my list. I do take a lot of stock into my prior lists into how I put these together. But when a guy does that, how am I going to keep Josh Winder down? He's got ERA around 2, a whip around 1, 6 strikeout to walk ratio almost in double A. What more can you ask for out of a guy? And the velo's there. There was no reason for me to keep him down there anymore. So bumped him way up. Gilberto Celestino and Ben Rortvedt kind of back-to-back there. I've always been really high on Ben Rortvedt. I think he's going to have a really long major league career. I think Gilberto Celestino could too. Both of those guys, if you're a Twins fan and you haven't paid much attention to the minor leagues, you have not been impressed. Those guys were not ready to face major league pitching. I can say that as confidently as I could say that about any hitter. These guys have barely played in double A, triple A, the high minors, they've barely seen advanced pitching. So to throw them out there against major league pitching is almost unfair. The Twins only did it because they basically had to with all those injuries. So don't look at those guys too much and grade them off of those major league performances. I think there's they both performed when they were in the minors pretty well in small samples, and I still like them both quite a bit. And I put a lot of stock into defensive positioning, and I think Celestino's a center fielder, Rortvedt's a catcher, good defensive catcher, and now his framing numbers look pretty good as well. So keeping those guys way up there. Keone Cavaco, kind of in that same conversation. I think he's a shortstop, and if you can play shortstop and are as athletic as he is, and he's hit more for Fort Myers before he went on the injured list. He hit more this year than in his debut. So there were 2 guys above him that graduated. So keeping him at 7 is kind of moving him down in a way. But still way up there. Matt Wallner, he's also hurt. That's going to be a common theme throughout this whole list, unfortunately, but I have him at 6. I moved him up from 8th, kind of flip-flop him above Cavaco. He looked really good before he got hurt for Cedar Rapids. Was really crushing the ball. And he's a really big guy, but I think he's a lot more athletic than he maybe kind of looks out on the field. He seems faster than he seems. He's got a great arm in the outfield. So I could see him being an asset as a corner outfielder and a good bat. And then the top 5, the one guy that really stands out has got to be Jose Miranda. This might be way too aggressive. I'm moving him up from 19th, which I'm kind of kicking myself. I had him down that low to begin with. He was a guy who I made note of on the channel here about his really good Puerto Rican Winter League experience and how he was hitting for some power. I should have put more stock into that, and I didn't. So kind of, I feel like he should have been higher anyway. But the way he's played, he's got like a 900 OPS. He's not striking out still in Double-A as a really young guy. I couldn't keep him down. I couldn't keep him down any lower than this at 5th. Part of it's, some of the guys graduating, part of it, some of the guys not really playing well, but it's mostly Miranda just being incredible. One of the highest OPSs, one of the highest home runs, number of home runs, one of the lowest strikeout rates in Double-A. So he's hitting for more power without sacrificing the contact that he's always been amazing at. So, and he's playing not only third base, second base, but also some shortstop. I don't think there's any way he comes up and plays any shortstop in the majors, but that tells you kind of how they feel about his infield defense. So I am thrilled with how Jose Miranda has played, and he's a very exciting prospect in this system right now. The top 4, those are all familiar names. I'm not going to get too much into it. Again, the top guys to graduate were Kirilloff and Jeffers. They are no longer prospect eligible. Trevor Larnach will not be any day now. So unfortunately, there's a lot of injuries in this top ones. Royce Lewis, again, kind of like I was saying with Blaine Enlow, I don't think the ACL tear that's going to cost him his season is going to really hurt his overall development much. He's what he was going to be is probably what he's going to be still. Really athletic guy, can play shortstop, can play center. He hits for more power than I think people will realize is what he's going to hit for. Not sure he's going to bring a lot of batting average or on-base ability, but he's going to be playing a premium defensive position and hitting for power. That is a stud. Larnach, of course, we're seeing him. He's playing really great. And then Duran Balazovic, I've had those guys in that order for basically ever. I haven't really seen anything to motivate me to move them, but if you make the argument you'd have Jordan Balazovic above Jhoan Duran, I can't really complain with that too much. You can have them back-to-back. They're basically on the same level. I just haven't seen a reason to put Duran behind him. And Duran, that 100-mile-per-hour velo is so special. Not that Balazovic throws, doesn't have the velo, but for a starting pitcher throwing triple digits now, of course, he's not healthy at the moment, so that's always sort of the key factor in that. But we'll see. Again, if those guys, Duran was also struggling throwing strikes. If that continues, he's going to fall. You got to throw strikes. Don't care how hard you throw. But that is my list. I've got highlights. I got a playlist I'll put a card in for here if you want to see highlights of these guys playing. I have most, not all. I have videos on most of these guys in that playlist, so go check that out. But thanks for checking this out. This has been Tom. We'll talk again soon. Thank you.